Hey guys, Rick Stone here from Our Stony Acres. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be addressing a trend that I have been seeing going around the internet. I've seen it on Instagram, I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it on TikTok, and that is this thing, hashtag leave the leaves, okay? And basically they're talking about just leaving your leaves from your trees that are falling here in the fall, just leave them on the ground. And I'm going to be very careful about how I address this because I 100% understand the sentiment behind why people are suggesting that we leave the leaves. I just don't agree completely with all the logic, and I have some better solutions for you that are going to end up doing the same thing that they're trying to accomplish without leaving the leaves on our grass. Okay, so let's talk about that. Now, before we get started, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click that notification bell so you get noticed every time I release new videos. Go follow us over on Instagram as well. We'd love to have you join us there. And I do have a free mini course that I'm going to talk to you about at the end of this video, so make sure you stick around till the end. Okay, so this trend that's going around, and I've seen memes and posts on Facebook and Instagram, videos in a few places as well, all talking about how we should just let the leaves from our trees fall and leave them, okay? And this isn't, in my opinion, the world's greatest idea, and especially it's not the best use of those leaves, okay? Now, the sentiment behind this is that we shouldn't be sending those leaves to the landfill. We shouldn't just be bagging them up and sending them off to the landfill. And the main argument there is that when we send those bags of leaves to the landfill, they're not going to compost and rot down correctly, okay? They're going to produce too much methane in the non-oxygen environment, and that is not good for the environment. And I agree with that point, okay? We shouldn't be sending our leaves off to, the landfills. We just shouldn't be doing that. But they have a couple of other arguments that they put out there that are not really all that valid. One of the first arguments that they make is that we should leave the leaves because it provides cover for beneficial insects, okay? There are a few beneficial insects that cover over the winter in leaves like that are down on the ground. There are a few varieties of bees that will do that, but most of the traditional bees that we're used to as pollinators in our garden, and then butterflies and things like that, are not going to be overwintering in leaf cover, okay? Our ladybugs, our praying mantis, most of our bees are not going to be hiding under that leaf cover. And do you know what is going to be hiding under there instead? Slugs and snails and squash bugs and all of the non-beneficial pests that we really don't want in our garden. And so we shouldn't be leaving those leaves thinking that we're providing cover for those insects, because it's mostly pests that we are going to be overwintering in our garden beds and in our lawns if we leave those leaves. The next argument that they make is that we should be leaving those leaves because it provides a natural mulch that will help to suppress weeds. Okay, that's 100% not true in our lawns, okay? If you leave your leaves, especially if you've got a lot of trees that are putting down big piles of leaves, if you leave those on your lawn, it is going to kill your lawn, okay? So if you have a lawn environment in your yard, it's definitely going to be killing your lawn. The other thing is that when we leave those leaves, that's not the right kind of mulch that we want, like for a garden, a vegetable garden type scenario, because they mat down too much and they don't allow oxygen and moisture through, and so they kind of just become this matted down mess at the top of our garden. And so we don't want that. Instead, we want something that's more chopped up. And so, if you mow your leaves and you want to put those down as a mulch in your garden, that's a great thing to do. But having just this leaf fall that's sitting in our garden is going to just promote disease issues. It's going to keep the moisture from making it to the soil, and is just not going to be good, especially for our lawns, but also for our garden areas as well. Now, the last argument is by leaving the leaves, we're returning carbon to the soil. This is 100% true, okay? The problem is it takes a long time for that carbon to break down and get into our soil. So sometimes I'll see people say, well, I leave my leaves and by spring they're gone. That's because they blew away. Okay, that's not because they rotted. It takes a good season, you know, a whole year for leaves to break down and rot away in your garden. And while they're doing that, especially in like your vegetable garden, they're going to be robbing nitrogen from the upper layers of your soil. So the microbes that are going to be doing the decomposition need nitrogen in order to make that decomposition happen. And so they're going to draw nitrogen out of the upper layers of your soil, which is then going to rob that nitrogen from your plants that your garden is going to need. Okay, so yes, it will return carbon eventually. Okay, so those are the arguments that they make. Again, I understand the sentiment. The sentiment is we don't want to be sending all of that plant material to the landfills, and I 100% agree with that. Okay, so what should you be doing instead? If we're not going to leave the leaves on our grass and in our gardens, what should we be doing with those leaves instead? Okay, so the first thing is you can leave them in certain areas. Okay, so if you've got undeveloped areas like pastures or orchards, areas under your fruit trees, or even flower beds, those you can leave the leaves in those areas. Okay, they will be okay there. They'll break down. Those areas can handle having a leaf cover that's going to take a whole year to break down. So that's fine. If you've got an area like that, go ahead and leave those leaves there. That's absolutely fine. But the next thing you should do with those leaves is use them for the brown ingredients in your compost systems. Okay, so I love leaves. I do everything that I can to collect the leaves. I rake up all the leaves from my yard. I go out and steal as many as I can from my neighbors. My daughter brings her leaves over to my house so that I can use them to compost. You're going to be mixing those leaves in as your brown ingredient. You'll mix them in 2 to 3 parts brown to about 1 part green, and the greens are going to be things like grass clippings or food scraps or coffee grounds, things like that. We mix those together. That will break down and make a very beneficial compound, which is called compost, and that is going to do very, very well for your garden. And so turning those leaves into compost is really the best use that you can have for those leaves. And so that's the one thing that I would encourage you to do. Figure out a compost system and use those leaves for that compost. Now, the next thing that you can do with your leaves is make what we call leaf mold. Okay, so leaf mold is essentially the end result of the decomposition of a whole bunch of leaves over a long period of time. Okay, the way you make leaf mold is you need some kind of a container. So some people will use like a compost bin. Other people will just get some wire fencing and create a big round bin, and then you just pile those leaves in it, and you just as many as you can get in there. You just stuff it full. Okay, you just pile those leaves in really, really deep, and then you just let them sit. It takes usually at least 2, sometimes 3 years to turn leaves into leaf mold. But once it's done, those leaves compost down and create, again, a very beneficial product for your garden. Okay, and so if you have an area where you have lots and lots of leaves and you can't make enough compost to do it, then you can pile all those leaves together, and then you just let those leaves rot down into leaf mold, and then you add that to your soil as well. It's not quite as good as compost, but it is really good for your garden as well, and it's a great way to use those leaves and get that carbon returned back into your garden. All right, and then the last thing that you can do with your leaves is what we call trench composting. Now, I'm going to leave a video link right up here so that you can get more details on trench composting. I did a video a couple of years ago, full kind of tutorial on how to do it. But essentially the idea with trench composting is you're going to do this in your garden, your vegetable garden, and what you want to do is dig a trench that's about 1 foot deep. Okay, you then add those leaves into the trench. You can pack them down in there pretty good. It's also really beneficial if you can add some greens to that. So maybe some grass clippings, some food scraps, things like that. Essentially, we're creating a mini compost pile in these trenches, okay? So you fill those trenches up with leaves, and then you replace the soil. At first, there's going to kind of be a mound there, and that's all right, because over the winter, is what's going to happen is those leaves are going to decompose and compost, and all the microbes and the worms and everything in the soil are going to come in and eat all that material. And it adds all of that organic material from the leaves and the grass clippings and everything back into the soil, and just creates a great environment in your garden beds. You can do this in raised beds, you can do it in in-ground gardens. Either one works really well, and that is a great way to get rid of a lot of leaves. In fact, for quite a few years before I really got serious about composting, that was the main way that I got rid of my leaves. I would just dig trenches in my garden, fill them in, and do that. My father-in-law did the same thing. He would dig this great big pit in his garden and put all of the leaves from his garden in every fall, cover it up, and he had really healthy, good soil, despite the fact that it was heavy clay, because he did that. And so that is a trench composting, again, is what that's called, and that is a great way to use up those leaves. Okay, so again, the intent of this video is not to 100% discount the sentiment about what this Leave the Leaves hashtag is all about. I understand we don't want to be sending those leaves to the landfill. We just don't want to do that, but we do want to be using them up in an appropriate way that's going to benefit our garden and not kill our lawns and not overwinter pests in our garden. Okay, so use them up. You can leave them in areas where they're undeveloped and where it's not going to damage grass or leave pests in your garden. You can compost them, you can make leaf mold, or you can do trench composting. All of those are ways to use up those fall leaves. Okay, all right. Thanks for watching this week. Make sure you subscribe while you're here. Go follow us over on Instagram as well. And while I've got you, we've got a free mini course that we're offering this fall. There's a link in the description of this video that you can click on to go check it out. It's 4 garden tasks that you should be doing this fall that are going to make your spring garden even that much better. And give you a hint, one of those is trench composting. We talk quite a bit more about that in that video. It's about 25 minutes long and it is free. There's a link down in the description you can click on to go check that out. Okay, that's all I have for you for this week. Everybody have a fantastic week. Happy gardening.